There are things that people my age usually keep silent about, not because they are ashamed, but because they are too simple to explain and too complex to understand. There was a day in my life when nothing special happened. No one cried. No one asked me to stay. There were no loud words. And yet, it was on that very day that almost everything was decided. At the time, I didn't know I was making a choice. It seemed to me that I was simply doing nothing, just not moving in one direction. 60 years passed before I realized that sometimes the greatest consequences come not from a step forward, but from a step you didn't take. I will tell you this story. It's not about passion. It's about the one who stayed. Sometimes I quietly say my own name, Richard, as if checking whether it still belongs to me after all these years. At 88, you start seeing things differently. Not wider, deeper, not brighter, calmer. You might be looking now for someone who will change everything, someone with whom your heart beats faster, with whom the world suddenly becomes different. I understand that. In youth, it seems that love must be an event, an explosion, a revolution. Something must happen, and you are no longer the same. But do you know what I realized too late? Life isn't always built around those who burst in. More often, it is built around those who don't disappear. We notice strong feelings. We remember first touches, first promises, first losses. And presence, quiet, daily, unwavering, seems secondary for a long time, like a background that doesn't need attention, like something that simply exists. And it is this existing that shapes us more than any wow moment. You may disagree. You may think that love is about intensity, about passion, about risk. And that's true. Sometimes it is. But there is another dimension, not loud, not showy. Love as endurance, as patience, as the choice to stay, even when nothing special happens. I want to tell you a story not about an explosion, not about drama, and not even about a great romance in the way books or movies describe it. It will be a story about a person who stayed, about how presence can turn out to be more significant than excitement, how silent fidelity to time is sometimes deeper than loud words, and how respect for another's choice, even when it's not always understood, can become a form of love that you don't immediately recognize. I won't lecture you. I won't say that you must choose calm over passion or stability over risk. Each of us walks our own paths. I will only share what I saw when I was no longer in a hurry. Perhaps you are now looking toward someone who promises more, who speaks more brightly, who seems like a chance for another life, and yet beside you is someone who simply doesn't leave, doesn't insist, doesn't pull, doesn't vanish. I once stood between these two directions, and I didn't make a dramatic choice. I simply stayed. I was 27, an age when you are no longer a teenager, but you still don't know who you will truly become. In those years, life in America changed quickly. A job today, gone tomorrow. Plans made for a year, undone in a month. I lived then in a constant inner tension, though outwardly, I tried to appear confident. There was a woman beside me. She didn't speak loud words. She didn't make grand plans. She didn't ask who I would become in 10 years. She simply existed. And when I hesitated, she didn't push. When I doubted, she didn't demand decisions. At the same time, another opportunity appeared, and I'm not even talking about another woman, but another life. A new city, new people, prospects that promised more movement, more recognition. And yes, there was someone who looked at me as if they saw something great in me, as if I had already become the person I had only dreamed of being. It's tempting. When someone looks at you with admiration, you start believing in that version of yourself that doesn't yet exist. But the one who was beside me didn't look with admiration. She looked attentively, calmly, and she saw not potential, but me in the present, with all my hesitations, small pride, fears. She didn't try to make me bigger, and she didn't try to make me smaller. I didn't make a dramatic choice. There was no scene at the train station with a ticket in hand, tearing it in half. Everything happened quietly. I simply didn't go. I didn't accept the offer. I didn't go where it seemed brighter. Why? Honestly, not because of great love, not because of nobility. Partly because of fatigue. Partly because of the fear of starting from scratch. Partly out of gratitude for having someone beside me who didn't make my life harder. And also because of habit. We underestimate the power of habit. When there is a person beside you to whom you already know how to return after a hard day, when you understand her silence, when the pause between you doesn't frighten. I didn't promise her eternity that day. I didn't even say anything special. I simply stayed. Perhaps, deep down, I thought, if this is a mistake, I still have time to change. In youth, it always seems there is plenty of time, that any decision can be replayed. But the truth is that some choices happen precisely when you do nothing, when you don't break, don't run, don't destroy. I didn't become a hero. I didn't prove my loyalty to anyone. I simply allowed events not to turn me in another direction. And she too didn't demand anything, didn't set conditions, didn't ask for proof. Perhaps it was this absence of pressure that held me closer than any promise could. Now, 60 years later, I think of that period not with pride and not with regret, but with quiet curiosity, because then I didn't yet know that sometimes the greatest choice is the one that looks like an ordinary day. I respect my younger self for not running away, and I respect her for not holding on. The first years after my didn't go were quiet, not in the sense of being without events. There were plenty. Jobs changed. We learned to budget our money so it would last until the end of the month. We argued over small things, made up without grand speeches. It just didn't look like a great love story. It was life. And here's the strange thing. When a person is beside you every day, their presence becomes unnoticed. Not because they matter less, but because you stop examining them. You get used to their voice, their steps, their reactions. They seem to grow into your rhythm. There were years when I hardly thought that being together was a choice. It seemed like just a state of things, like a name, like age, like a profession. In my mid-40s, I went through a period of inner unrest. Outwardly, everything was stable, but inside there was a feeling as if I had missed something, as if there were another version of me, braver, brighter, less predictable. And I caught myself thinking, what if I had left at 27? Who would I have become? Would I have been happier or just different? These questions didn't sound like reproach, more like curiosity. A person always looks back a little at the lives they haven't lived. During those years, she was beside me just as calmly as before, but I began noticing irritation in myself. Her constancy sometimes seemed like predictability. Her silence, indifference. Her absence of drama, absence of passion. We went through periods of silent distance, not quarrels, not crises with loud words, but quiet separation, when each lived a little inside themselves. I think she asked herself questions too, perhaps even the same ones. Is this love or just inertia? I was afraid to answer, because if it's only inertia, then it turns out I built a life on habit. And if it's love, why doesn't it always feel like something grand? In my early 50s, I experienced another turning point. Not an event, a state. I suddenly realized that I was beginning to tire of chasing validation of my own significance. It no longer mattered so much who looked at me with admiration. And at that moment, I began to see her differently. I noticed that she had always given me space to be who I am. When I changed jobs, she didn't say it was a mistake. When I doubted myself, she didn't push me to prove anything to the world. She respected my decisions, even those she didn't agree with. And I remembered that early choice. I stayed then not because she held me, but because she allowed me to decide for myself. It's a subtle thing, respecting another's choice. It doesn't always look like support. Sometimes it looks like absence of pressure, like silent acceptance that you are a separate person. We had years of fatigue. There were days when I saw nothing special in her. Moments when it seemed we were just cohabitants who knew each other's habits well. But each time I mentally drifted away, I suddenly realized she's still here, not out of duty, not out of fear, but by her own choice. And that stopped me. I never answered the question of who I would have become if I had left. Maybe more successful, maybe lonelier, maybe a completely different man. But I became who I became, beside her. And the question, is this love or inertia? Over the years, stopped demanding a clear answer. It simply remained part of my inner dialogue. Because long-term relationships, they are not a constant flame. They are more like a smoldering fire which doesn't always warm strongly, but rarely goes out on its own. And yet, I only fully understood the significance of her presence now. Now, at 88, I see my life not as a sequence of events, but as a line that someone walked alongside me. And this line is straight not because there were no difficulties, but because it never broke. I do not idealize her. She was not flawless, neither was I. We both could stay silent longer than necessary, could fail to hear each other, could grow tired, but we stayed. And here's what I understand now. The person I became, my form, was shaped not by loud victories or great decisions. It was shaped by duration, by the fact that there was someone beside me who endured my character, my doubts, my changes. I think of respect, how she never tried to change me by force. She could disagree, could be upset, but she recognized my right to be different. And when her life involved decisions I didn't fully understand, I learned to do the same, not to hold, not to break, not to prove my correctness at any cost. Respect for another's choice is perhaps the most mature form of love. It hurts sometimes. It requires restraint, but it leaves a person their dignity. I no longer ask myself whether it was love or inertia, because inertia does not endure decades. It crumbles under the pressure of time, but we do not. And you know what I realized last? Love doesn't always change you. Sometimes it does something quieter, perhaps more important. It allows you to remain yourself, without constantly proving you are worth more, without the fear that tomorrow you will be replaced by a better version. I am grateful not for passion, though it existed. Not for drama, though there was plenty. I am grateful that someone lived time alongside me, consciously, not by chance. You may be looking for someone who will change everything, and maybe you need that. I don't know your path, but if there is someone beside you who does not disappear, look at them more closely. Sometimes, love is not the one that turns the world upside down. It is the one that quietly keeps it balanced while you grow together. I didn't understand this at once, but perhaps this is the meaning of time. It allows you to see the weight of what once seemed ordinary, and for that, I am grateful. If quiet stories like this, without shouting, but with the truth that time brings, feel close to you, stay. Like if you feel this conversation might resonate with you, subscribe if you want to hear about life as seen by someone who has lived a long path and learned to value what truly matters. Here, there will be no rush. There will be life as it reveals itself from the distance of time.